Hi there, RJ. Thank you for coming. I'm excited to hear what you have to say. Please introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
So I'm RJ Horner. I give myself the moniker of a beacon of life and leadership, which is just, another name for life coach. I help empower thought leaders. So people who are, less than confident or sure of their niche or their mindset or their ability to develop as a leader. I help them set themselves up and position themselves as thought leaders in the online space.
Hmm. Great, great. Okay, nice and concise. Okay, so the next one is, and this is an important one, I think, what question or questions do you think we should be asking ourselves about transforming organizational culture and leadership?
I think one of the biggest ones is, who are we serving, right? We always want to serve the customer, of course, but you know internally, are we doing justice to our staff, to our employees, and to the people who do the work for us?
Hmm. Okay. Anything else?
um I think one of the things that is often missing in our work culture is the the day-to-day, or the health and wellness. Are we doing enough to make sure that our staff are um prepared and capable, like, and I mean that mentally more than, are they able to do the work? I mean, are
Hmm.
they in a position? Are they healthy? Are they strong? So that one, of course, is a big one.
Right. Couldn't agree more. Okay, so I really like that. That's actually a really good question because it's serving, and yeah, if the human aspect of we humans, which will never be extracted until the robots take over,
Hmm.
um, we are still physical beings with health and lives and stuff, and that's an important issue, I think, that we think about, like you said, the health and wellness of people, because if that's not good, that will ultimately affect the whole, like, trickle down effect through your whole business.
Yeah.
So the next question then is, what are the most significant challenges you face in transforming organizational culture and leadership?
Yeah, I don't know. I think getting buy-in is the biggest thing, right? Like, we have a vision, we have a message, and we have the mission or culture that we have to, or mandates even, that we have to adhere to. And then how do we, on our staff level, or, again, those people who we contractors who may work for us, how do we get them to buy into the vision that we're trying to sell? Because they may not see their part in it. They may not know. We hear about that thing about, they ask three workers who are, what do you do? And the one guy says, well, I'm cutting stone. The other guy says, I'm building a building. And the other one says, I'm building a cathedral, right? So it's, how do we see our value, or how do we get them to see the value in what they're doing? And then to the overall um to the overall vision, mission, values, how do we get people to buy in?
Right. Yeah. Very important point. Okay, so the next one is, could you describe a recent situation where you felt that a leader could have benefited from additional training in culture building, leadership, or both?
um One of the things that really is a big one is difficult conversations, right? Not all conversations are going to be productive, or, not all conversations are going to go the way a leader may want them to go. And so, just training in, not necessarily just communication, but how to deal with those difficult conversations, where getting people to, increase their performance, change their attitude or behavior that isn't
Hmm.
meeting the workforce. So having those difficult conversations it really does require a higher level of communication training.
Right. So regarding that, can you think of a specific situation that's sort of the intention? Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying, and I agree with it. The question is, have you had a recent situation where you've actually seen that, a real scenario where it's like they could really use communication training?
Well, and that's why I brought it up, is because I've had that situation recently.
Okay,
Not
okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and so that came from a manager who was trying to deal with me on, a higher up who was trying to deal with me, and it didn't go over as well as they would have expected, right? Because again, and it wasn't about performance; it was just about a clash, and it wasn't even an attitude clash or anything like that. It was just a difference of opinion,
Hmm.
and because this person was looking at it from their personal aspect, or the way they were treated, they weren't thinking about how how to get my buy-in, how to get me on their side. And so and they weren't selling it. They weren't bringing it in the sense of, look, we're trying to, get along here. We're trying to find out how do we move forward from this. It was really about their personal belief,
Hmm.
or their personal the fact that they were offended.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's not an easy thing. And when you're thinking about this, or we were talking about that, thank you for clarifying. Yeah, that was the main point, is that it be from a real situation, ideally. And I've seen the same situation myself personally, so I know what you're talking about. And that brings up in my mind the book Crucial Conversations,
Right. Yeah.
which I was like, he's channeling Crucial Conversations, or it's a book I'm going to recommend, because yeah, and it's such a good book. Okay, so the next one is, what specific outcomes would you hope to achieve through training in leadership and culture building?
Um, Again, it's about um, making sure that everybody is not necessarily competent at their roles, because we all have jobs to do. We're all expected, like we have job expectations, rules, and responsibilities. But it's about knowing how to roll with the punches. In other words, things come up in leadership that we may not expect. And how do we deal with those challenges? So it's about resilience, or capability of differing perspectives, differing opportunities. A lot of one of the big problems in leadership is, this is the way things are done, this is our culture, this is how we do it, but things don't operate that way in the real world. So it's about, how do we take what we're experiencing, take what's happening to us right now, and turn it into something we can work with.
Hmm. Okay, great. Next one is, in your opinion, what are the key skills and competencies that leaders need to create a thriving organizational culture? And just so you know, before you start answering the question, apologies if this seems redundant, because every question depends on your previous answer. So you may have already answered this. If you have,
Mm-hmm.
cool. And if you haven't,
Mm-hmm.
please elaborate. So let me repeat the question after I've qualified it there. So, in your opinion, what are the key skills and competencies that leaders need to create a thriving organizational culture?
I think communication is the master key, right? We all have a vision to sell. We have to get people to do things they might not otherwise want to do. So communication is certainly the master key. In other words, that's the key that'll open the doors. It'll get people to do what you want them to do, or being able to tell them what you expect of them as well. Um, but dealing with people, as again, it's about resilience, right?
Hmm.
It's about knowing that I'm not the same as you, and the next person, that each person in each different role has different beliefs, different understandings, different values. So dealing with people, and I'm not suggesting they have to know everything about HR, because we all have departments, but knowing how each of these departments plays into the organizational structure, of course, is beneficial. And then, of course, knowing your organization's mandate or purpose, that
Hmm.
helps you sell that. That helps you develop, the structure that you're going to build with
Right.
your staff.
Right. It's the vision. If everybody isn't on the same page as to where you're supposed to be going, which oftentimes is one of the challenges, right? It's like, who can tell me what our big vision is? What is the horizon? What is the North Star for this organization? Really good organizations, everybody knows it. So that when ambiguity comes up, then they can say, okay, what would best serve where we're trying to go in the big picture? Whereas if people don't have that clarity, then it's sort of like everybody just kind of, it's like herding cats. Okay, next one. What is the ideal duration for a comprehensive course on transforming organizational culture, leadership, or both?
That's a lot of training. That's a lot to consider. Um, I've seen courses go, 5 days, right? Because there's some deep, intensive work to be done there.
Mhm.
But it would depend on what the purpose of the course is. And I would say don't, ideally don't bring people in for 5 days of training. Because first of all, when you're running a business, who has 5 days of training they can get or 5 days they can dedicate to training? But you know what? Breaking them into bite-sized trainings on more niche or specific topics where you can
Hmm.
invite people in for 2 to 3 hours of training, that's more effective than like a full week of off the job. And when their focus really is, oh my God, what's going on back there? I have no idea. I've left it in somebody else's hands. Their focus is not on training.
Right. There's not a lot of mindfulness or presence there. So can I interpret? I'm going to interpret you. So you said 5 days. So you're saying 40 hours of training, but better
Yeah, yeah.
as bite-sized pieces.
Yep.
Okay, excellent. The next one is, what factors would influence your decision about this ideal duration? So what's going to make that increase or decrease? What kind of variables would tweak that?
And so I think I kind of covered that because I mean your attention span to the training, right? Um, are you able to focus? And again, a 3 hour training, I can tune in for 3 hours, give my focus to what's going on, but take me away for 8 hours, and I need to know, like, yes, we have delegates, but you're still concerned about what they're doing and how well things are going without you there.
Right, right. Good point. Good point. Okay, so the next one is, which formats or delivery methods would be most effective for the kind of training that we've talked about? So developing the culture and leadership communication, everything that you've said up to this point. Which formats would you say would be best for delivering this kind of training?
Yeah, and it depends on what you're training on. Team building, again, you do have a full day, or you take away to people to a retreat. So those in person, away from the office, team building where you're working on in workshop format. Um, that would be something that's a method of delivery. But I've been in a lot of trainings where it's 3 to 4 hours and it's delivered virtually online, and it's developed in such a structure that you have opportunity to practice or put these skills into effect and learn them, and then take them back and put them into practice in your own work environment.
Right. I think that practice component is super critical because, here in Asia, in addition to doing this, I've spent many years and continue to, because to keep my visa here in Japan, I need to have a certain amount of hours working at Japanese companies. And I don't care what it is. I don't care, I've had super intelligent PhDs and young children, and nobody gets better without the ability to actually say, okay, we learned this thing, now let's do it. Right. So that practice component, I think, is ultra important rather than saying, here's the information, now go back to work and apply it, because it's never going to happen under those conditions. Okay, so next one is, what things would determine the value of let me redo this. Sorry. What things would determine the value of organizational culture and leadership training? So to qualify what I mean by value here, this could be the value as in the hard to quantify value, how important it is, but also if we had to put a dollar amount on it, because ultimately when you're selling training or when you're doing training, you have to have some idea of how you would derive that monetary value for providing that training too.
Well, there's two things. First of all, is of course, is it pertinent to the role, right? Is it something that's going to be required in order for people to perform their duties? And is it going to make them more effective at performing their duties? Of course, but I think it boils down to, is it required? How badly is it required for them to perform their duties? If not having this training is going to cause error, cause difficulties, then of course there's no value in it, or little value in it. Or sorry, if they can't, it's going to make them not perform. There is extreme value. Sorry, that's what I meant to say. But then the other thing you want to consider is the ROI, and that doesn't necessarily mean how much dollars are we going to get back for investing in this course, but putting them in this course. What is going to be the return that the company's going to get for investing this X amount of dollars, which, some courses out there can be tens of thousands of dollars, right? So.
Right, because that's what it is. I mean, at some level, it may convert into monetary, but if it's the happiness of them at work and their job performance and how well they do, there is a real but more challenging to quantify thing. Or if they quit and those numbers have been quantified as being 6 months to a year of somebody's wages, to replace them because they're unhappy. So, that's where I think this stuff has the greatest value is like, what's this course worth to you? Well, how much do you pay this person per year? And how many people do you want to, while you're retraining and obviously getting lost production, regardless of what they're doing, how much money are you willing to lose by losing them because you didn't do some important things? Because they're human beings. Because their life outside of work matters to them just like yours does. And if that's not considered, then consider how much it's costing you to continuously, in many cases, replace. Like I've seen figures in whether it's sales or certain things where it's like, there's 100% turnover per year. So then it's like, that's a good basis saying, well, what is the value of retaining your employees who are then growing in skill and knowledge, which if they leave, they're taking with them. So yeah. Okay, next one is, ideally, how often should this kind of training take place? So I'm talking about training frequency for the formal stuff, whether it's bite size or not, how often would be most effective to make that training stick and be well used?
Well, it would depend on the technical details or the technical aspect of the training. I would say, anywhere from 1 year to 3 years, like renewals. And sometimes it might only be a refresher training rather than, full aspect training again. But, but it also might not be necessary if you can have on-demand resources, right? So some courses can be built, content that they can use as reference, and
right.
Then frequency really is not a factor.
So let's say for argument's sake, if for some reason that on demand was not the way, maybe they needed something live with live feedback, a human being against which to practice or get feedback about how they're doing. So if there were formal sessions, sort of how often do you think would be most desirable? So you've given me duration that is ongoing on a subscription or something model, which is coming up, by the way, 1 to 3 years and on demand. But if it did have to have a frequency, what frequency do you think would be most effective?
Um, and depends, is it something that is going to be constantly need to be redeveloped or reassessed? Again, a year might be ideal, but it also could be something where once a month they have a certain type of session, right? So it may not be the exact same training every month, but you're reinforcing these principles, reinforcing the thoughts or the concepts that you've learned.
Right. Okay. So let me refine this a little bit because I think I've failed to communicate what I meant to say, and that is, so when you go to school, let's just say ordinary school, when you go to high school, you go every day because that's what you're required to do. So I'm kind of focusing at least initially on the primary training period where they're going from 0 to 1, where they're going from, so that initial training period, how often should they be attending the training? And then, as you said, maintenance or refresher as necessary. So let's break it down
Got
into,
you.
yeah, how often should the sessions take place, if sessions indeed need to take place, right? And after that, how often should those refreshers or, touch base kind of things happen?
Got you. No, I understand. So, and again, we want to, as much as we want to invest in training, right? We want
Mhm.
to make it available. We also have work assignments, duties to perform, and we can't minimize that to a large extent. So, once a week would be ideal. I wouldn't
Mhm.
want to go any more frequent than that. Um, and then again, refreshers, you can probably do one every month to 3 months, you know what I mean, after the initial training.
Right. 1 to 3 months. It's interesting, sort of with technology, right? It's like I'm typing these answers. They're on the video, but it's like just, yeah, it helps cement it for me too.
For
It's like,
sure.
why am I doing this? Okay, so next one, and this is related to, sort of related. Anyway, I'll give you the question. This breaks down into 3 parts. First part is which types of between session support would be most beneficial. So this is obviously in the case where there are sessions or where there is training available that isn't available on demand. But sometimes if it's the once a week, perfect scenario, if they're meeting on Thursday morning and then they have a problem related to the training, that is, they're trying to apply it, but they can't right away on Friday morning, and now they have to wait a week to be able to enact that. So in that kind of case, which types of between session support would be most beneficial?
So we're participating in lean training. I'm sure you've heard of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we're focusing on is we're working in teams, right? So having a
Mm-hmm.
team, dedicated to a problem or solution. And then so that team gets to work together, develop the problem together. But then also having a mentor or somebody, whether it be instructor or somebody, who is the sponsor or related to the problem, who they can be a sounding board and work with them or say, what, great, you guys have put this together, but how about if you tried this or have you considered this? So some ongoing support through that as well.
Right, right. Okay. So, and I think that is the sort of the ideal situation. If, let's say, continuous slash ongoing support through team members or mentors isn't available, so a little more of a downgraded scenario, how often do you think would be still most beneficial? So ideally all the time, but if it had to be less than all the time, because of course, maybe these other team members, of course, have their own other work responsibilities. Is it once a week, once a day for 15 minutes? What kind of a scenario would fall out if it can't be as needed on demand?
Mhm. Yeah, no, with our team, we tried to meet 2 to 3 times a week, and it was for an hour, up to 2 hours if needed. Like we could extend. We gave ourselves a 2 hour buffer, but the ideal was to meet for an hour, run through the structure. What do we need? And then everybody go off and work on their individual tasks. Meet up, Wednesday instead of Monday. From Monday we meet up again Wednesday. What have you completed? How are we doing? What do we need to work on? So an hour and I would say an hour rushes through that, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
everybody's got their part and their pieces to add. So there's why we gave ourselves a 2 hour buffer. And a lot of times it was an hour and a half to 2 hours. And then
Right.
as far as the mentor availability, they were available once a week for an hour just to kind of, download and make suggestions and help us, get on a different path or stay the course on what we were working on.
Right. Nice. Yeah, actually, I did something a few years ago. I was part of I guess I worked as an intern, technically, a product manager for an Amazon private label seller. And we used to have once a week meetings, and they would stretch on forever because they were a combination social. We were all over the world, as is obvious for something like Amazon. You don't need to be anywhere specific. But I made the crazy proposal one day. I said, okay, look, Nico, why don't we try this? Why don't we have a 15-minute everyday hard stop? I know that's a lot, but that means people aren't waiting, and it totally redefined it. We spent far less time as a result of doing it more frequently, having a hard stop, but because it was every day or 5 days a week, what happened was whoever was didn't get to their part, they would then be first on the agenda. So it was like a rolling
Mm,
agenda. Okay, who
mhm.
didn't get their question answered? And it kept people really tight and concise. I was so impressed at how shockingly well it worked. It was just like 15 hard stop, go. And people just focused really well.
Wow.
Yeah. I hope maybe if that's useful to you, great. Please do it. I didn't
We use
invent
a
it,
we use
but
a 30
yeah.
minute we use a 30-minute once a week.
Hmm.
And then everybody gets their part. And then we even have time to talk about new business or things that need to be introduced. So we
Hmm.
use a 30-minute once a week. So and believe it or not, that is helpful.
Right. Oh, I'm sure it is. So realistically, how often would it be practical and sustainable? And we've covered that too. Okay, answered and answered. One of the things about these questions, of course, is depending on how thorough or how fine-grained your initial answer is, then it's already covered. So we've already done those. Okay, so
Okay.
next one is, we're flying along. How do you envision this training, that is the training we've been talking about, helping leaders address specific cultural and leadership challenges within an organization?
Um, Again, it's about getting team involvement. It's about getting people buying in. So and usually especially with lean training that we've been working on, it's
Hmm.
about something that's currently going on in the culture or within the organization. So it's about working and training, developing, but solving a problem at the same time. So really it builds in the value in working on the training or developing this process.
Hmm. Right, because you're training, but you're training under a
Current
real
conditions.
world scenario. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
we're solving a real problem. We're not just training for the abstract exercise of it. We're training and working on something real that will then give us ROI immediately. Even the moment that the training is finished, we've already solved a problem in the real environment. So I really like that. A problem. Okay, next one is considering the potential impact. If the training we've been discussing were a course, what pricing model would you find most appealing? And I'm going to pause for a second before I let you answer because I want to slice this again a little thinner, and that is, so this is training you're providing or I'm providing to somebody. What what kind of pricing model do you think would be appealing to your clients, to the clients you've worked with? What preference would they have in terms of that pricing model?
Again, it also depends. Well, it depends on the value they're getting, of course. And but the duration, those are things we all want to consider. How much time lost,
Hmm.
but ideally, for a training that's going to be um, problem solving or productive, we're
Hmm.
looking at probably, and you want to consider it per person. So I'd probably say in the arena of 3 to 5 thousand per person.
Okay. So in terms of the pricing model, the main thing I'm after here, and it tells me that my questions, that's been the most challenging thing, is like making the questions clear, detailed enough, but not convoluted. Okay, so 3 to 5K per person, but what sort of pricing model? Paid up front, subscription as needed, per KPI, whatever. So that's really what I mean in terms of, you've given me a number and that's great. How would they prefer to be charged? Because I've heard, to my own surprise, how all over the map that can be. Because some say
Mhm.
one thing, some say another. So what, in your experience, would you say your clients prefer?
Well, again, you expect that they have the budget, right? Um,
Right.
so ideally, you have your deliverables, and it's expected that you're going to be able to perform on your deliverables.
Mm-hmm.
So the KPIs, the performance, it's built into the training. So I would honestly say that some people like some form of deposit or something like that up front to secure the training.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, we're talking like net 30 to 90 days. So in other words, training's performed.
Right.
Here's your certification, that sort of thing. Now the bill is due, right? So you have 30 days or 90 days to pay up.
Right. Right. So, okay. Yeah. So after the training is the
Yeah.
primary thing there, within 30 to 90 days. Okay. So the next one then is, and this is the second part of this one, and that is to you if you were the client or recipient of the training. So now you are buying training from somebody else, whether it
Okay.
be, let's say it's in this genre, but in something that you feel that you could, everybody can learn something new. So in that case, what kind of pricing model would you prefer? So now you're paying. How would you prefer to do this?
Beautiful. I love the way you flipped that one because I mean, I've given you a price and I've given you, expectations as far as payment. But if I were paying, probably, I want to be as frugal or as cheap as possible. So, again, as much as I said 3 to 5, I'd love to see a training for 15 to $1,900, right?
Mhm.
And then some people, like I said, they want a deposit. Um, I might be willing to put a deposit. Again, you want to secure the contractor.
Mhm.
So deposit is standard. And then again, I don't mind. I mean, I'd like to know I have 30 days or so to pay, but there's also a better option, which is because we want our, residual income. So we'd like to be able to
Mhm.
pay it from our residual income. So even monthly payments would be, ideal.
Okay. I like that. I'm glad you qualified, because I was going to say, okay, that's what you see as realistic. Now, what would you most prefer? But you said ideally. So plus monthly payments. Okay. Um, yeah, two of the ones that have come up, or the one in particular, because I'm especially fond of it, is performance-based pricing.
Mm,
That is, bottom line is like, great, another training that may make no difference. How about we get a cut of the difference? We define what the metric is that we're trying to improve. And that could be right down to actual dollar figures, but it's related to dollar figures no matter what. But if X goes up 30%, then we get X% of the 30% improvement, because by definition, this training has had that influence.
I love
Uh,
that. That's brilliant.
yeah, yeah. And the companies that are using it, well, let me give you another example, actually. The reason Amazon dominates even though Amazon has a lot of things I think they do not so great, um, what they do exceptionally well is it's like, well, if the product sucks, just give it back. No friction, no nonsense. It's just bottom line, it does what you say it does. So in effect, it's like performance-based pricing for products, right? But a satisfaction guarantee. And there's a really famous pest control company somewhere in the US. And I've seen article after article, and I first heard about this in a book. They charge 10 times what their competitors do. They are commercial pest control, so for restaurants and other businesses like that. And it's sort of like if you find one cockroach or one rat or one whatever kind of pest you have and you get shut down, we will pay for those expenses. Because their guarantee is so exceptional, it turns out that they can charge 10 times as much. And in honoring that guarantee, because it doesn't mean anything if you don't honor it, right?
Mhm.
So just like Amazon is like, well, here's your money back. By honoring it, the volume of purchases that risk transference that's happening is so disproportionate. And even a lot of people who are dissatisfied with a product never ask for their money back. It's shocking, but it's very true. I've been on that end where it's like I should have asked for my money back. I had a year and I didn't do it. It's like, well, I knew I had that option. Um, but it was like, they spend $300,000 a year honoring this exceptional guarantee, but they make tens of millions additional income because that guarantee exists. So the ROI is out of this world. What questions, if any, do you have about these topics? So in this case, I mean, is there, as much as you do what you do and you have a lot of answers, which is why you're doing the training you're doing, is there anything that you're stuck on or questions or musings you said, if somebody knew this, or if I could learn this? So is there any questions that you have on these topics of culture building and leadership?
Um, you know, I would just say, how do we get it into the hands of more people, right?
Hmm.
Um, I'm versed, but at the same time, I could always learn more.
All right.
Um, and then so where do we find all of and it's an extensive library too, right? It's not just one subject matter. So it's an extensive library. So where do we find all these resources or content?
Hmm. So resources or content. So you're talking about when you're talking about putting into the hands of more people, I'm thinking marketing, right? Finding your customer.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about where do you find resources or content, are you talking about resources or content to build out the trainings that show demand?
Um, I was really, yeah, well, yeah. So it's about building out that library, right? Where do we get the tools, the content? I guess content is not the right word, but strategies, I guess is what I'm looking for.
Mhm. Okay, great. Okay, next one is almost finished. How could I make this interview better?
Um, it's done good. But maybe spend some time. And I know you're trying to keep to a certain time limit. You don't want to bore people. You don't want to, um, you don't want to drag it on. But at the same time, maybe spending a few minutes just building rapport in the beginning. Kind of we got right into it in the
Right.
beginning, which is great. Don't get me wrong; it was a great interview. But maybe just spend 5, 7 minutes just getting to know each other rather than jumping into the interview.
Right. And
So that we're
honestly, yeah, go ahead.
so that we're all more comfortable, right? Like you're reading from a script, which is good, or you're reading from your question notes. But this way there's a more of a camaraderie or a friendship between each other, right? We know each
Mhm.
other, we're comfortable talking to each other. So it's a more give and take.
Right. And it's ironic because that's sort of what I'm doing. I'm pendulating back and forth. Before it was like, hey, how's it going? Ba ba ba. And that was good. And some of my interviews were going 2.5 hours.
Mm.
And so it was like the main consistent feedback I've got so far is, constrain the time, because even though we love talking about these topics, after an hour and a half, 2 hours of vibing, and mainly the one variable that I can do the most is just for me to shut up after asking the question and to interject less. But I can't, if I interject none at all, it tends to be less of an organic conversation, like the performance-based pricing. I hope that gave you value. And if it didn't, or if it did, then I can't really remove all of that. I just need to find a sweet spot where it's like, okay,
Mm.
they answer, Tim does 30 seconds or a minute of commentary or feedback or ideas. So
And I love the way you did that. You not only expanded on my thoughts in some cases, but you did interject with some options that were valuable for me as well. And I love that, by the way.
Excellent. Thank you. So that's good too. So now this question, you may have already answered it again. Okay, how could I make this interview better for you? That is, for the guest experience, how could I make it better? Obviously, the answer you gave addressed that. Is there anything else I could do to make it better for you as a guest or for guests?
One of the things, I mean, look, if we're giving our time, what are we using it for, right? What is it? What is the purpose of the interview? Let us know that. But are we going to have access to it? Can we promote it? Where can we promote it? These are opportunities we want to consider.
View, and yeah, you can share them out anywhere you damn well please.
Wonderful.
Because this is as far as I'm concerned, this is our content because we're both providing something. Yeah, I'll send you all that
Mhm.
information. So
Awesome.
thank
Thank
you.
you.
And the next one is, and this is the very final one, how could I make this interview better for our audience?
Um, you've got a structure going on. You're asking the questions, which is great. Um, and I'm not sure if you're going to release it as documentary type format, but a little bit more engaging. Because I mean, if people are going to tune into this, they're going to want to watch it. It has to be some sort of entertainment value for them as well. As much as it's informative and great, um,
Mhm.
there's got to be a reason for them to tune in and to continue to tune in. Like you said, it's going to be released over days, right? So
Mhm.
how do we get them coming back? So it's got to be engaging and entertaining.
So I should sing. Maybe that would be bad.
It might help.
Um, but and actually this is where I've got to balance the two elements. I think many of the longer interviews, it is an engaging conversation. There's some laughter, there's personal references, right? That is engaging, but I have to find the sweet spot between being too concise and robotic, which is not who I am at all, and just being too friendly and chatty to the point where it's like it's just too long.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm still working on it, but it's getting there. Okay. Thank you so much for your time. Absolutely. Like I said, I don't know exactly when it is, but I'll reach back to you on LinkedIn. So, RJ, thank you very much. It was awesome to talk to you. I will reach out to you later and we'll figure out the rest of it. Okay. Bye bye.
Wonderful. Thank you much.